Hello, fellow truth seekers. My name is Dieter Gedeik. Since the age of 9, I've desired to know my purpose in life. I saw my parents work so hard without getting very far. I challenged them and they could not give me an answer. This led me to question, is this all there is to life? Just birth, school, work, having children, growing old, and finally death? If there was a God, then why so much pain and injustice? Nobody could answer my questions. Ever since then, I've read and brooded over everything I could get my hands on, meditated and studied for many years with fellow seekers, disciples, and teachers. Quite a few years ago, I came to the point in my research when the many bits of information, including lots of personal experience, fell into place. And from then on, I was able to answer questions like, why am I here? And what is my purpose? Is this all there is to my existence? Where do I come from? Where do I go from here? Well, why do I have to experience pain? Why do I see so much injustice in the world? What comes after death? Is everything I learned lost when I die? If some of these questions burn within you, then, my fellow truth seeker, I'm happily sharing the small measure of light and truth I wrestled from my studies of the ancient wisdom and from my personal experiences. Enjoy.
Part 1, Chapter 1. Introduction to the Wisdom and the Three Parts. Communion with something higher. Purpose and right attitude. Source of consciousness. Evolution of matter and form. And human constitution and its origin.
Introduction to the Ancient Wisdom series in 3 parts. Part 1, Journey to Consciousness. This is what you are watching now. Part 2, 7 Pillars of Ancient Wisdom and the Human Spiritual Kingdom. Part 3, Personality Integration and Introduction to Meditation. This information is presented with the hope of inspiring those who are ready to explore what their real purpose of life is and how to live a more fulfilling, happier existence. These videos are for those eager and ready to enter or have entered the path of self-enforced evolution. They are designed to help you to understand your divine nature and your role in this great scheme of life. This knowledge is essential for most of us to prepare for and take our meditation efforts towards a meaningful goal, that of soul contact and beyond. However rudimentary I try to make this introduction, at times it is technical, and your understanding will be proportional to your previous studies of the subject. Are you ready to enter upon this journey? Much of this information came about by focusing on one word or one concept at a time, by comparing the digitized classics written by H.P. Blavatsky, C.W. Leadbeater, Annie Besant, Alice Bailey, Lucille Cedar-Krantz, and my teacher Douglas M. Baker, and many more. Then I try to come up with the best way to reconciliate this information and present it here. I apologize to those teachers if I erred in any way. Further, it is my sincere hope to inspire somebody to present this information in a more professional fashion.
The wisdom is not a religion, philosophy, or science. However, this knowledge can be applied to all of these areas to clarify and enhance your understanding of them. The wisdom is an independent field of study experience, and practice. It is to facilitate step-by-step unfoldment from individuality to group awareness, from unconscious activity to conscious cooperation with your higher self and its purpose for you, the personality. The ancient wisdom has been around for as long as humanity itself. The Buddha taught it as wisdom, and the Christ as love. Others know it by Gnosticism, Theosophy, and the ancient Greeks referred to it as truth, goodness, and beauty. Throughout the ages, only a few perpetuated this knowledge, and then mostly in the Far East. Here, in the West, advanced thinkers from time to time appeared to move people's consciousness towards this truth. In more recent times, H.P. Blavatsky, with her masterpiece The Secret Doctrine and other writings, inspired many. Then followed Annie Besant, Charles Leadbeater, and the in-depth writings of Alice Bailey, each removing blind after blind that hid the truth, while bringing us the wisdom in the words of that day.
Metaphysics explains not only what is beyond physics, but also relates very much to the physics of here and now. The study of the wisdom today is not unlike a giant jigsaw puzzle. These presentations were created to serve as the picture on top of the box that the puzzle of life came in. It can be the matrix into which most of your life's experiences and future research may be placed in order to fully understand them. Why should you care? What would you do if your manager at work tells you that she is sending you to a foreign country next week to open a new branch? Would you immediately start preparing for this? Would you check on visa requirements, transportation, currency, inoculation requirements, local laws, housing, etc.? Of course you would. Whether you shed your physical body tomorrow or in 60 years, you will go to a place you might, right now, know little about. What you learn and apply right here while in the physical body will directly determine the quality and duration of your stay as you, the personality, in the afterlife, the astral plane, the mental plane, and even more illustrious planes. The willful progress you make can tremendously benefit you starting even right now. With these three introductory presentations, I can give you no more than a general idea of the subject and to create a framework which you must fill in via 1. Study and contemplation of the wisdom's classics. Here I list the authors in the sequence of readability by Douglas M. Baker, C.W. Leadbeater, the two disciples who wrote The Rainbow Bridge, Lucille Cedarkrantz, Annie Besant, Alice Bailey, and H.P. Blavatsky, and quite a few others. 2. Service to humanity. And 3. Meditation. Okay, now that we reviewed what the ancient wisdom is and why you might gain a deeper understanding of yourself, we will look at the first part I call Journey into Consciousness. It is hoped that these three parts, when sequentially watched, will provide a framework into which you can place further research. Reality is stranger than the human mind can imagine.
The East. Philosophy, science, and religion in the East, emphasized expansion of the human consciousness via rigorous practices like yoga, study of ancient teachings, meditation, and right living. Hence, a Buddhist's goal is to become a Buddha, and a Hindu knows his path leads him to divinity. This can be called vertical expansion of consciousness. The West. The Christian West relied on adherence to moral rules, obedience to church doctrine, and salvation via faith in the compassion of those in heaven. Expansion of consciousness takes place primarily via the arts and physical sciences. This can be called horizontal expansion of consciousness. It is this difference in approach to salvation that caused the spiritual orientation in the East and the technocratic and materialistic civilizations in the West.
Western vocabulary today is very limited in describing vertical consciousness. Hence, I must use words like logos, monad, causal body, astral, etheric, karma, and dweller. These words will be explained to you during this presentation.
Study of the wisdom provides the tools to approach all human and planetary conditions via understanding, compassion, and intelligent action. Wisdom concerns the one self. Knowledge deals with the not self. For those who seek authority behind this presentation, the truth must be proven via its application. These concepts are of value only if they can be worked out as living truths within the life and affairs of humanity. Therefore, do not look to the source of this information for its authenticity, but by application of it within your own life and affairs. The readiness to initiate the journey cannot be forced, nor can people be faulted if it has not occurred in them as yet. The level of consciousness has to have advanced to the stage where such an intention will be meaningful and attractive.
Become the thinker and learn to become your own authority. Accepting something new is not easy because we invested so much time and energy in what we know right now. Build yourself a mental shelf on which you place new information that you're not ready to accept. As your consciousness expands, some of it will fall into place later. The key word here is contemplate, consider. That which is new might be of value. The purpose of this presentation is to give you a better understanding of who and what you really are and how to go from here to become a more balanced, happier person, become a better expression of your higher self, become more effective in service to others. To help accelerate the expansion of your consciousness by understanding yourself and what affects you. And what I very strongly believe in, to explain that your thoughts are very tangible and that you're liable for them.
For the mind to flower, it has to go beyond what it knows. Motive gives consciousness direction.
The success in learning something new is directly related to your attitude. Cultivate an open mind. As H.P. Blavatsky told us, the mind is the slayer of the real. The mind can only ask questions, all new ideas come from a higher level. All truth is relative to your present stage of consciousness. As your consciousness expands, truth as you perceive it today will change. Accept as truth only what you comprehend with both the heart and mind, because your higher consciousness has connections into your heart and head. Cultivate an inner knowing, intuition. Intuition is a function of your higher self. Begin to listen to that yet small voice. Do not blindly accept as fact what comes from a so-called authority. With today's tools, the world of information is yours, but be cautious. Do not call falsity what you cannot accept today. Remember the mental shelf you were asked to build? If the idea still does not fit, put it back on that shelf. Words are only doors you must pass through to reach the concept, and all truth loses something of itself while dressed in words. You are given the words, but you must contemplate them and attempt to intuit the world of meaning behind each word.
Ask yourself, do you want truth or just an outer sound of harmony?
People travel to wonder at the height of the mountains, at the huge waves of the seas, at the long course of the rivers, at the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motion of the stars, and yet they pass by themselves without wondering.
Do you know that every atom in your physical body was created within life and death of a star? That every second within your body 5 million red blood cells die and are born? Did you know that almost every atom in your physical body is replaced about every 3 years? And this, my friends, is just describing a very, very small part of your total being. Today's psychology considers only two factors when treating a person: genetics derived from the parents and environmental factors such as schooling, upbringing, etc. Esoteric psychology also considers a third and most important factor: that each of us possess a higher nature, an eternal, immortal part we call the soul. And it is this important divine aspect of us we will explore in this presentation. It is said, as you earnestly take charge of your own evolution, your consciousness doubles every year. As explained before, the wisdom is not a religion, nor do I belong to any religious group, or for that matter, to no worldly organization at all. But because I present this information in English and in the Western Hemisphere, I will use as many Christian words as possible to make this more understandable. And whenever I have to use Latin, Greek, or Sanskrit words, I will try to explain them. Initially, these first few slides are very esoteric, but please, please bear with me and things will become clearer. There is no gender above that of the human condition. Please keep this in mind if I still use the terms he, him, etc.
The ancient wisdom tells us that this universe and everything therein expresses itself in cycles. Once you understand the human evolutionary cycle, you begin to sense the cycles that apply to greater beings than us. This includes the cycle of a planet, a solar system, a galaxy, and this universe alike. Let us now explore in very scant detail how our present universe manifested. The beginning of a new cycle, also called the beginning of a Manvantara, or the outward manifestation of spirit into matter, is when this universal self, absolute consciousness, pure spirit, the one life, awakens himself. The period of a pralaya, or matter having returned to spirit, has passed, during which he absorbed and incorporated all positive gains made during his last period of manifestation. The ancient Greeks called this great being Logos, also a term used for God or Word. There are many lesser logi like our planetary logos, solar logos, etc. Each live and move and have their being within a greater one. Each of these great consciousnesses use their respective systems like planets and stars to manifest and express themselves in. So then, this great being rouses himself, encircling himself in a sphere of fine matter, root matter, mapping out his future universe on the highest plane of vibration. He brings with him the previous Manvantara's evolution, enriched via that cycle. A duality of self and not self is the result. Self we call spirit or life. Not self we call matter or form. The interplay and relation between these results in a third effect, that of the ever-changing universe. The basic attribute of spirit is will, the will to be. The basic attribute of matter is intelligent matter, or that which it is to become. The interplay between his will and intelligence manifests the attribute or quality of love wisdom. These three divine attributes or aspects he imposes upon himself and all that follows.
The Trinity of Cause. Do we have any chance of understanding the spirit and the consciousness of the one life with our finite minds? I say not. But we can at least approach an understanding of the one life in whom we live and move and have our being if we study these three basic principles, qualities, or aspects as they manifest in this universe: divine will, divine intelligence, divine love, wisdom.
The appearance in form is the working out or breathing forth of the three principles of deity.
For example, the interaction of divine will and divine intelligence manifests his aspect of divine wisdom, love. Every major religion has a trinity of some form. The ancient Greeks called it truth, goodness, beauty, and the Hindu refers to these as Siva, Vishnu, and Brahma. These three principles, which have been referred to as the Holy Trinity by the Christian Church and symbolized in geometric form as the triangle of manifestation, are the three persons in one: God the Father, God the Mother or Holy Ghost, and God the Son. The Father aspect is seen as the positive pole, the Mother aspect as the negative pole, and the Son aspect as that which is created by the interplay of energies between the two. The ancient wisdom translates this as the positive pole being spirit, the negative pole being matter, and the interplay creating the magnetic field, manifesting consciousness and form. Purpose and intelligence begets evolution, and Atma and Manas begets Buddhi.
And now we can begin to explain consciousness. Spirit or life at the very highest vibrations as the positive pole, and matter and form at its very lowest point as the negative pole. And consciousness is the result of the continuous attraction and repulsion between spirit and matter. Spirit is matter at its highest vibration, and matter is spirit at its lowest vibration. And all spirit is conditioned by matter. Even the smallest particle of matter is informed by spirit. And all consciousness has form. Every form is conscious, and this will be later explained. Consciousness is an electromagnetic phenomenon vibrating at every frequency between spirit and matter. These frequencies are divided into 7 major groups, or cosmic planes. The lowest of these planes we call cosmic physical plane, and almost everything within this solar system plays out and exists on the cosmic physical plane. We also subdivide that cosmic physical plane into 7 subplanes. Consciousness is the medium by which spirit gains experience in matter, and consciousness is the evolution of being or identity. Matter is the evolution of intelligence or substance.
Consciousness serves as the vehicle by which spirit can become self-conscious on all planes of vibration between lowest matter and its source, spirit. Presently, in this solar system, human evolution takes place only within the cosmic physical plane.
What is a plane? Here are some very general statements. First, what we call matter is really energy held in a certain shape and vibrating at a certain rate or frequency. Planes are best described as zones within which matter vibrates at a particular frequency. As higher matter vibrates, as higher and more spiritual is the plane it belongs to. We can think of the vibrational difference between matter and spirit as a spectrum filled with matter of every vibration. Think of a spectrum like this. A hot stove radiates heat in a lower portion of the spectrum. We call it infrared, whereas a beam of X-rays exists on a much higher portion of the spectrum. X-rays vibrate much faster than the heat from the stove. In order to see matter on a higher vibrational plane, we have to raise something within us to the frequency that matter vibrates at. This we do in meditation, and by building higher vibrational matter into our bodies. This image shows the divisions of all planes within this universe. Here I'm pointing out the cosmic physical plane in which all human evolution occurs. This arrow points out the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. Some of these names might sound familiar to you: the physical, the astral, and the mental planes. Beyond that, we have the Buddhic, Atmic, Monadic, and Logoic planes. And these planes in turn are again subdivided into 7 additional planes. Notice that this arrow is pointing upward from the physical human plane, which we are all so familiar with. We are all familiar with the solid, liquid, gaseous states, but beyond these are 4 physical etheric planes our 5 senses cannot detect. These are vibrational planes scientists today find ions, protons, neutrinos, and electrons on. The ancient wisdom provides us a lot of information about the cosmic physical plane, but very little information is given about the higher cosmic planes. Our very finite minds would not comprehend them anyway. Now that we have gained some knowledge of what consciousness is, I need to point out the vast difference between consciousness and self-consciousness. All forms are conscious, but not all forms are self-conscious. To become self-conscious requires eons of evolving a complex enough form to hold sufficient consciousness and so much more. Let us explore how the solar logos established via his consciousness and energies this solar system, and how, with the help of the planetary logos, brought about life and evolution on Earth. For simplicity's sake, I left many details out, such as group souls, chains, rounds, root races, sub-races, and other important occurrences. Again, I must remind you that this is no more than a simplistic introduction to give you a framework into which you might place further research. Matter, in ever more complex form, came about via the first 2 waves emanating from the solar logos. This slide is attempting to show you how life evolved on the planet up to this point in time. These 3 life waves we call the 3 outpourings which established this solar system. At this point, I must remind the listener that the Logos had brought with him other kingdoms from a previous evolution. These beings, at various stages of development, we call the elemental kingdom and the Deva kingdom. The elemental kingdom is made up of the elementals of fire, air, ether, earth, and water. The Logos employs these kingdoms to ensoul all matter and form on their respective planes. They cooperate with him and later with man in the scheme of evolution. From them we derive our perishable, physical, emotional, and lower mental bodies. And here we have the symbol of the solar logos as an upright triangle with the symbols of his 3 major attributes of will, wisdom, love, and intelligence, or also called the Trinity of our solar logos. Notice on the right the 7 major planes within the solar system. The mental plane is divided into two major sections, which we refer to as the higher mental plane and the lower mental plane. As the solar locus sends forth his first life wave of active intelligence, as he penetrates further and further towards the physical, he builds more and more complex atoms, and he maintains them by an ever ongoing stream of his energy. The second life wave, emanating from the attribute of wisdom, love, combines the atoms into forms capable of holding increasing intensity of solar consciousness as they evolve. At its lowest point, it reaches and establishes on the physical plane the mineral kingdom, here depicted as a diamond. These two life waves we call involutionary because they are descending from spirit into denser and denser matter. And once the mineral kingdom is established, the second life wave sweeps upward into more and more complex forms. The mineral kingdom evolves into the plant kingdom. The plant kingdom evolves into simple biological life forms such as microbes, animals of simple structure, and then into more and more advanced animals, birds, until it finally reaches a point of the anthropoid with a substantially more brain capacity. And as these forms become more and more complex, they develop the capacity to feel emotions, pain, and such, and until the anthropoid begins to be evolved enough to reach the lower mental plane. And finally, when the anthropoid, the ape-like animal, has reached a high enough evolutionary point to begin to use tools such as the chimpanzees today, the logos, via his attribute of will, and remember that is spirit, creates the third life wave, outpouring of spirit to aid in the evolution of higher consciousness and gaining qualities like self-consciousness on all planes. This form now has become sufficiently complex to begin to develop characteristics such as personality. And at the boundaries between higher mental and lower mental, these two life waves meet. And in a sudden burst, the soul is created. And from then on, the soul overshadows the personality and creates it again and again and again. This point we call the point of individualization of the primitive human, and it occurred about 18 million years ago on this planet. This is the point at which the primitive animal became a primitive human, and it instilled self-consciousness within his brain for the first time. Remember that all of this is not only established by the Trinity of our solar logos, sending forth his energies, but they are maintained 24/7 forever. During the time of this momentous occurrence, the human kingdom is established, and from here we grew into ordinary human and advanced humans, in the future disciples, and finally enter the higher mental plane as an adept into the next human spiritual kingdom.
Everything is evolving into something better. Evolution applies to an atom and a universe alike. Via experience in matter and form, spirit-infused consciousness evolves into self-consciousness on all planes. Each of us are individualized, self-conscious beings and the lower expression of the one life. We are spirit, having a human experience.
With this slide, I'm trying to give you a very simplified but fundamental idea of how the human constitution came about. And again, for simplicity's sake, I left out many details, like other life streams who use this planet for their own evolutionary path, such as the Deva kingdom. Let us only focus on the human constitution and its purpose for being. Our first proposition is that each of us is a spark within the divine flame we call the solar logos. This spark is also called the spirit within, the firstborn, the spark divine, or the Christ within us. The wisdom refers to it as the monad, and in Sanskrit it is called Yiv Atman. The monads reside in and are the substance of three major force centers, also referred to as chakras, of the solar logos. These sparks, or monads, are our true inner being, and via these, the logos intends to become self-conscious on all planes below the divine logoic plane he resides on. He does so by reflecting his three divine attributes or qualities via the monads downwards towards the physical, the lowest vibrational plane. His goal is to spiritualize all matter on every plane below him and gain experience via self-consciousness on every level of vibration. At the end of this Manvantara, we and all that was achieved is returned to spirit. There are about 63 billion monads expressing themselves on the various planes concerned with the earth and the unfoldment of its planetary logos. You are one of them. Let us now consider the slide. It depicts each item as pulled apart into higher and lower vibrations or frequencies. In reality, much of it occurs within the same space. On the right are the names of the 7 major planes of this solar system, which were established during the first outpouring. And on the left, you will notice that each plane is again divided into 7 subplanes. The physical and emotional subplanes have unique names. The mental plane is divided into higher and lower sections. The first 3 subplanes belonging to the higher mental plane and the 4 lower subplanes to the lower mental plane. And our solar logos resides on the highest plane, the divine logoic plane. Now, let us look at the sequence of events. The monad, always attached to and part of the solar logos, descends to the monadic plane. He can go no further into lower planes due to his high vibration. Hence, he sends part of his being into the vibrational lower spiritual plane, also called the Atmic plane. Via this, he builds an outpost of his consciousness and qualities by attracting an atom of that plane. Remember, matter exists on every plane, and that this matter and all form is ensouled via the logos, via the elemental, Deva, and other kingdoms.
And as the ancient wisdom tells us, this atom becomes attached to the monad and remains part of its mechanism for experiencing that plane for the whole period of the monad's evolution. It is therefore termed the spiritual, also called the Atmic permanent atom. After a period of learning that might occupy 1,000,000 years or more, the procedure is carried further towards an atom on the next lowest plane, the intuitional or Buddhic plane, and then to an atom of the higher mental or monastic plane. These three permanent atoms form the higher triad. They will be the response mechanism for activities experienced by the monad on planes down as far as the third subplane of the higher mental or monastic plane. The threads of finest fohat or spiritual fire that anchor the permanent atoms to the monad are called the sutratma.
This triad of atoms we call the spiritual soul or higher triad. With every step towards the physical plane, more and more of his qualities and influence are lost. It is like us swimming underwater or putting on a heavy diving suit and lead boots. As lower the plane, as more diversified but grosser and less spiritual the forms become. Finally, the monad extends this sutratma into the lower mental plane and acquires the mental permanent atom, and a film of mental essence forms around it. Then he repeats this again on the emotional plane. An astral permanent atom is appropriated, and a film embraces both mental and astral units with the essence of both planes. After this, an atom is attracted to the sutratma on the physical plane and becomes the permanent physical atom. Up to this point, we refer to the descending of spirit into matter, involution. The monad has now extended itself into the mineral kingdom, and from here he is on the evolutionary path. We call this arrangement of mental, astral, and physical permanent atoms the lower triad, and a triple film of higher matter encases the three atoms. Remember that none of the monad's outposts or triads at this point are self-conscious. To avoid confusion, I am giving no time frame in which this entire process occurred. This would require talking about globes, rounds, chains, root races. Further, none of the documentation I found seems to fully agree on how many years each step took. Science today believes that the first rocks formed about 3.7 billion years ago, and 3.4 billion years ago the first primitive plant life occurred, and 2 billion years ago photosynthesis came about. The lower triad now operates through a group soul with many other lower triads. The substance of the group soul is drawn from the films around the triads. This mechanism enables the monads to ensoul mineral matter, metals, organic substances, gemstones, etc. Eons expire as these groups of monads gain experience while ensouling the ever-evolving compounds and forms of the mineral kingdom. Later, this process enables biological manifestation. The number of monads using the group soul diminishes as they ensoul the plant kingdom and later the animal kingdom. Many eons pass until only one monad ensouls an anthropoid-like life form. The brain is now a very complex structure and has attracted sufficient consciousness guided by the monad. The astral form has sufficiently grown and emotions are felt. Memories are formed to make survival and reprocreation more effective. The beginning of fashioning and use of tools comes about. On the lower mental plane, the mental unit begins to grow. This point was reached about 18 million years ago, and the monad now takes increasing notice of its lower triad. The higher mental permanent atom becomes highly active, magnetically attractive, as the third outpouring flows down from the monad. Remember the third outflowing of spirit, shown in an earlier slide? The film encasing the lower triad is ruptured and reforms around the mental permanent atom as its causal body. This now becomes the body for part of the monad's consciousness we call our soul. From now on, it serves him to accumulate experience gained via repeated recreation of the lower triad that we call reincarnation and the human personality. Our three lower bodies remain attached to the soul not only by the sutratma, but also by a self-created bridgehead of light we call the antakarana. Soul growth after this is rapid, as he reaches down with part of his consciousness into the planes below again and again, creating a lower mental body, an astral body, and a physical body. We call this reincarnation, and with each time he does so, part of his consciousness guides the building of a new personality. This is the moment of individualization. Until now, he was conscious like a piece of coal, responding to pressure and heat to form a diamond. Like the sunflower, always pointing its flower towards the sun, and a fish fleeing from danger. But now, the primitive human is able to think of himself as individual, separate and different from the other members of his tribe. This is self-consciousness. With this slide, I hope to explain to you that there is only one consciousness. Even the planetary logos resides within this field of consciousness. You might ask yourself, then how come I am self-conscious as an individual? Well, the Hindu chants, I am the bubble, make me the sea. And for so many years as a child, I too told myself, why would I want to give up my self-identity if there is only one consciousness? Later, I began to understand that this universal consciousness is based on oneness and unity with individualization. We are a spiritual focal point within that one spirit. Perhaps this is the most effective way for this universe's consciousness to become self-conscious on all planes of vibration. One of the major laws governing it is the law of economics. And our journey is that of self-identification. Via false teachings, we have isolated ourselves from what we truly are. Today, we might think we are just our physical body. But as we learn and our consciousness expands and becomes more inclusive, we identify ourselves with the emotional and then with the mental body. This process is carried forward forever. Sooner or later, as you look inwards and upwards in vibration, you become soul conscious, and you, the personality, merges with the soul. The soul in turn desires to be one with the monad. All along, self-identity is preserved, while you share all accumulated knowledge, wisdom, and power of that level of consciousness. It is needless to go beyond this point with our finite minds. Just know that when you experience for the first time soul consciousness, whether for a few seconds or minutes, your life changes because that moment you share the consciousness of the one in whom you live and move and have your being. Again, my friend, we are spirit having a human experience. To the extent we express the qualities and attributes of the Logos determines our level of self-consciousness within this one consciousness. The greatest tool we have is will, because will is the primary essence of spirit. Today, almost every human is only self-conscious in the physical brain.
A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty.
And now we come to chapter 2 of the journey into consciousness, and I named it What Else Makes Us Tick. First, the human outer forms, human faculties, forming of the personality, personality integration and hindrances, summary of consciousness, midlife crisis explained, principles of healing, the imprisoned splendor. Here's a good exercise for you. Where do you place yourself within your body? Good question. Here I show 6 of the 7 major force centers we have. I will explain those much later. Have you ever tried to locate your center of consciousness? Some of you locate yourself within the solar plexus center. This is the emotional center most of humanity operates from. Here the everyday mundane love is felt. Anger is felt here and most other emotions. Above that center is the heart center. Some of you locate themselves there. This center connects you to humanity on a higher emotional level. And this is where you would experience unselfish, agape love. The point in the center of the forehead is where many intellectual people locate themselves. Others believe they are conscious in the center of the head, or just above that. A good exercise would be right now for you to pause the video for a moment, closing your eyes and exploring a place you might find yourself within your body. Try that. With this slide, we are going to explore focus of the average human consciousness and our various bodies. This chart shows my estimate of where the average human consciousness is focused and what motivates him. This is, of course, only an estimate of humanity's average, and it would be a good exercise for you to determine the allocation of your attention and motivation of your thoughts, feelings, and actions yourself. First, take a step back and remember that we are spirit, using focal points of matter at various planes or vibrations to gain experience. These we call our vehicles or bodies of consciousness. While growing up, we, our parents, teachers, circumstances mostly formed our personality. In metaphysical terms, we ensouled or invested much of our consciousness into the physical, emotional, and mental forms. This has now identified us with and trapped us in these forms, dramatically reducing guidance and help from our soul. Remember that one of our challenges is that of self-identification. This is a never-ending task and causes a type of identity crisis as we begin to identify ourselves as being so much more than our physical body. This becomes especially frustrating when we begin to shift our identity from that of our personality to the soul, also referred to as higher consciousness. Hence, to avoid this confusion, from now on I will talk like we are a personality. Now let us look in more detail at our bodies, also called our lower triad, and our soul body also. Remember that these bodies interpenetrate the physical body. We are fairly familiar with our physical body. Science has told us much about it, and more knowledge is gained about it every day. Still more will be discovered so that science can come to terms with the acupuncturist and other healing arts that actually work. Here is the physical etheric form, also called etheric double. Even though we can not detect it with our five senses, it is still part of the physical plane. It is also called our vital or energy body because its function is to keep the physical body alive. Notice the location of the seven major force centers or chakras on its surface and the intricate network of channels or nadis that overlie the nervous system. These distribute the energies dwelling up within the chakras from a higher plane. These, in part, are worked on by the acupuncturist and other types of healers. An observer, like a trained clairvoyant, would notice a light blue light emanating from the skin, extending about 6 to 12 inches outward on a healthy individual. We call this the health aura, and it is the remnant of the energies received via the chakras. All this is surrounded by an oval bubble-like field we call the aura. And here's the emotional or astral body of an average person residing on the astral plane. The outline of the human form is the same and can be easily mistaken for the physical body when encountered on the astral plane. But again, a trained clairvoyant would see the mess we created with our emotions. During this and previous lives, we created a type of cage of concretized negative emotions like hate, fear, selfishness, and anger. Around the feet can be seen more loosely packed negative emotions, which we are trying to get rid of. These are like effluents and miasmas. The aura is mostly filled with negative, mist-like colors. The mental body resides on the lower mental plane and has the same human form we are familiar with. Here, our mental activities have attracted matter related to our purity of thoughts. The average person is built up via strongly held negative or positive beliefs, concretized thoughts via self-glorification, false idolization, and negative ideas. And again, the clairvoyant observer would see around the feet loosely held negative thoughts. These concretized astral and mental forms directly dictate our immediate responses to the daily affairs of life. They directly dictate our habits. They are our prison of how we feel and think, unless contemplation and reason is given a chance. I refer to them as being at the beginning of this presentation as our computer program. This is why new ideas passing through this buildup of fogs and crystallite thought forms and emotions are altered, reflected, or not easily accepted. Much of this came about while learning to function, survive, and prosper since childhood and previous lives. Science is now beginning to admit that our thoughts and feelings not only influence our health, but even our genes. Quoting one of the more enlightened ones, we are not victims of our genes, we are masters of our genetics. We call this pollution of the emotional body glamour, and that of the mental body illusion. The etheric body is surrounded by a single layer of atoms, permeated with a special variety of force called prana. This web serves as a one-way valve to allow only prana to flow from the astral plane into the physical plane. This web is flexible and protects us from premature looking into the astral plane. This web also serves as defense against negative influences reaching our physical body. Smoking, drugs, excessive alcohol, violent shocks, or outbursts of hate can make this film brittle and even puncture it. This typically occurs when an alcoholic in the final stages of delirium tremens breaks this web, allowing him to look into the very lowest denizens of the astral plane. Remember, every thought and emotion you ever created, you ensouled with part of your consciousness and gave it a life of its own. Part of your consciousness is trapped in these forms until they are redeemed or starved by attrition. In the final part of this introductory series, I give you 3 methods by which you can free yourself of this. Now let us consider the causal or soul body. It was created via the third outpouring, or spirit descending about 18 million years ago and causing individualization in you. It is the vehicle of higher consciousness and the lowest outpost of the monad. This self-conscious being has all the positive memories and qualities gained by the personalities it created, plus the reduced but still substantial qualities of his higher ego or self, the monad.
Maurice Burke, a former Physician General of Canada, told us, "This consciousness has his spiritual name, and some of those who touched the soul called him by different names. Dante called him Beatrice, and Roger Bacon, Master Peter. Balzac referred to him as Specialist and Seraphita, while Walt Whitman called him My Lover and O Soul."
My teacher, Dr. Douglas M. Baker, in his later years referred to him as my angel. You too, my fellow students, are one of those 700 plus personalities the soul sent forth during these 18 million years. But once you touch this wonderful, exalted being, you can never call yourself this little, isolated personality again. You have no choice but to be more than the calcium of your bones or the personality drifting around while you let slow evolution carry you forward.
Wordsworth's Ode on Imitations of Immortality, from Recollections of Early Childhood. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. But he beholds the light, and whence it flows. He sees it in his joy. The youth, who daily farther from the east must travel, still is nature's priest, and by the vision splendid is on his way attended. At length the man perceives it die away, and fade into the light of common day.
By now you're probably wondering if this can get any more complex while still being called an introduction. Well, I told you in the beginning that I created this presentation primarily for medium and advanced students. Nonetheless, I strongly believe that anybody can benefit from this if watching all three presentations. One builds upon the other. And at this point you might ask, why do we need three lower bodies? The easy answer could be the density of matter and lower vibrations. As denser the matter in each plane, as harder it becomes to penetrate. All matter of all planes coexist within the same space. They interpenetrate each other like air does water and water does sand. Remember the law of economics. On this planet, within the solar system and this universe, it has to be the best way to become self-conscious. Let me briefly explore the way these three lower bodies precipitate an idea from the soul. There is some magic involved here. We too are creators, even so most of us do it haphazardly and unconsciously. If understood, you can be much better at manifesting the desired outcome. This could make you a more effective person in all areas of your life, and certainly demonstrates how liable you are for every thought you create and direct.
All three bodies serve the growth and development of your consciousness and are our only contact with the world of affairs. As they serve us, we in turn energize and spiritualize that matter, including all kingdoms below us. All serve as an integrated part of the one life. It serves the unified growth and development of the consciousness in whom we live and move and have our being.
The soul, the thinker, the true self, the real you, originates a new idea or concept and releases it into the lower mental body. The mind in the mental body interprets the soul's and your purpose, and via visualization creates an image or plan of mental matter and releases it into the astral body. This we call a thought form. The emotional or astral body in turn translates the thought form and adds its magnetic quality and force and releases it into the etheric physical body. Here the etheric physical body adds physical substance to the energized mental astral creation to allow it to manifest as words, action, or physical form. Remember, these are physical plane manifestations of an idea or thought. In a way, we should be glad that only a very few amongst humanity can create a precise and powerful enough thought form that actually manifests in physical form. And this is how in life workshops I transmit words that have my knowledge, meaning, and substance of the subject within it. Study that which you create daily and then become a conscious creator for good. And may your creations increasingly be better ones. Contemplate about the dictum, as above, so below, as above, so below, which holds true throughout this universe.
All in this universe is the manifestation of consciousness via his will, spirit. You too are a minor, unconscious creator.
Since our topic is the human consciousness, we might as well look at what the ancient wisdom and our teachers tell us when humanity gained its faculties. In the left column, we have the name of the faculty. In the right column is the time of appearance in the human race. The center column correlates this with the approximate manifestation of these faculties in us beginning with our birth. Most of this information was provided by Maurice Book, former Surgeon General of Canada, and my teacher, Dr. Douglas M. Baker. Notice that memory, simple consciousness, curiosity, and use of tools came about prior to gaining self-consciousness, like some of the apes and very young children today. The human race gained with self-consciousness 18 million years ago the attributes of shame, remorse, and humor. Today babies gain these abilities around the age of 15 months. Gaining self-consciousness as the human race we spoke of before. Children at the age of 3 tend to recognize themselves as individuals. A child develops a sense of color at the age of 4, while this ability likely appeared in humanity 80 to 90,000 years ago. A child of 5 starts to develop the sense of fragrance. This and other senses seem to appear earlier and earlier in childhood today. Human moral nature, the ability to distinguish right from wrong. This came about only 10,000 years ago in the human race and in teenagers at the age of about 15. Here's the disturbing news. Maurice Bourke, about 100 years ago, found that 4 to 5% of humans fail to develop this ability during their lifetime. This statistic is likely worse in other countries. Soul consciousness today comes about in 1 out of 1 million people, and in those it seems to appear most likely between the age of 30 and 40 years. Forming of the personality. Your bodies are the latest projection into which the soul vested a portion of his consciousness. You and your bodies are the best the soul can and is allowed to send forth. By the soul, a point in time and space was created to take advantage of a particular zodiacal constellation. With each incarnation, the soul makes available the qualities every personality ever gained in the world of affairs. In your case, 700 or more lives. These qualities and lives are within your astral and mental subconscious, with whatever soul consciousness still remains imprisoned within them. The conditioning of your present personality came about due to 1. The most appropriate response of this aggregate of qualities to the environment, like peership influence, genetics, health, war, famine, sexual abuse, etc. 2. The karmic conditions and the soul's purpose and plan for this incarnation to work these out. 3. The ray makeup, the combination of energies the monad, the soul, the personality, and your bodies respond to. 4. Illusion and glamour clinging to your etheric, astral, mental bodies from this and previous lives. These were created by desire, ambitions, wishes, and idealized thought forms. This and the life manifesting the physical body are sometimes referred to as the dweller. 5. The continued influence of the soul, later causing frequently the midlife crisis.
We choose our joys and sorrows long before we experience them.
Now let us talk about personality integration and the hindrances.
The soul enters the playground of the Lord and plays thereon until he sees the star with 5 bright points and says, "My star."
By the age of 7, the mold has been cast. Thereafter, the vessel is refined and decorated by the soul. But shock, abuse, and genetics can crack the vessel so as to hinder self-consciousness from expressing itself. Let us look into this in a little more detail. Shock, physical injuries, intense anger, emotional and mental shock can damage the structure, the bodies, and the web. Mental and emotional abuse can bring about manifestation of a stronger, more able to cope personality from the cloud of the group personality. Abuse of drugs, smoking, alcohol, all can damage the brain and harden the web, reducing higher influence while allowing lower base influencing through. Genetics, often a karmic effect brought over from previous lives. To work out its cause and effect always exists simultaneously. Work out the cause and the effect must change. Personality integration always starts with you, the thinker, controlling the mind, controlling emotions, and controlling the physical brain, making them work as one. Hang in there, fellow students. We're almost done with the dry subject of consciousness. So let's just summarize the average person's consciousness, sometimes referred to as collective unconscious. This is vibrational information accessible via or stored in the 3 permanent atoms of our bodies. This information is the sum total of external impacts and responses to them ever since the mental permanent atom was acquired about 3.2 billion years ago. All this information and soul influence guides consciousness into expression in the following areas: dweller and emotional mental thought forms. It mostly governs the creation of present-day personality, setting the patterns for habitual responses to the daily affairs of life. Autonomic functions, primarily informing the sympathetic nervous system to perform those functions of the physical body which have now dropped below the threshold of consciousness, like heartbeat, digestion, etc. Instinct, instinctual responses by all the bodies to survive, perpetuate, and maintain themselves. This influence mostly comes from the astral and physical permanent atoms. When the thinker or mind is weak, instinct runs rampant. Previous lives, their continued influence lessening with age. Waking consciousness is consciousness working on mental and astral planes, using matter of those planes. It is seated in the physical brain as self-consciousness, using its brain and the connected nervous system as its instrument for willing, knowing, and acting on the physical plane. Memory of the present incarnation resides as vibrational information in the physical, astral, and mental brain cells, plus the permanent atoms. The physical brain is the only part in which consciousness has definitely become self-conscious. Now and after death, waking consciousness in the average person centers in the plane his outermost body resides in. An example of this is when you shed your physical body, you will become self-conscious in the astral plane, the next higher plane. Astral and mental self-consciousness. Signs are beginning to show up as rich, meaningful, and in-color dreams. Attention on these planes is not yet turned outward, hence its activities there find outlet only in a distorted fashion in the physical brain. At birth, the soul broods over the infant. At age 3, the soul attempts possession. At age 7, the soul influence slowly wanes because of external influences in daily life, creating clutter and pressure. The soul resumes meditation until adequate integration is achieved to draw his attention. And this is why the Catholic Church says, "Give us the child until he is 7, and the world can have him after that." Now let us talk about the midlife crisis, also referred to as midlife unrest. In an earlier slide, I talked about the 7 major force centers within the etheric body that keep the physical body alive. There's actually one more center established later in life. This is the work of the soul, as it pays more and more attention to his maturing personality. First, let us see how this occurs naturally. While the brow and head centers are somewhat active, the soul slowly and gently raises Kundalini fire up the spine, and when terminating in the head, the Ultra Major Center is established and awakened. This image shows the site of that chakra, and it coincides with the site of the carotid gland. This is the soul's call to its lower consciousness to look inward and upward. Then pranic energy uptake is increased and intellectual capacity enhanced. This extra energy and the will of the soul is interpreted by the average people interpret this as unrest. And the symptoms are increased aggressiveness and being more argumentative, dissatisfaction with status quo, trying to recapture lost youth, buying a Harley, outside affairs, running off with your secretary, overreaction to situations, and divorce. This extra energy makes integrated personalities highly dynamic, competent, high energy, driving him, herself, and others to excel. Spiritually oriented, integrated personalities interpret this additional energy as divine unrest. It propels the seekers towards spiritual matters, search for his or her soul, donating time or money to a good cause, changing occupation to serve and heal others, finding it less important to work for money, seeking the meaning of life. There is also an unnatural way. When Kundalini and the Ultra Major centers are awakened prematurely and or out of balance, all of the above could occur in a sporadic, manic, and temporary fashion. This energy should never be directed to centers below the diaphragm, and it should not be called divine unrest. And here I need to issue a warning. Never should an attempt be made to raise Kundalini fire unless you are supervised by somebody who knows what they're doing. If raised prematurely, it can damage or kill the physical body. Once temporarily established, unnaturally, depletion or blockage of Kundalini manifests as irritability, tendency to worry unnecessarily, loss of concentration, diminished memory, and forgetfulness.
The cause of all pain and suffering is ignorance.
And now let us very briefly talk about the principles of healing.
Type, strength, and quality of thoughts will manifest certain types, strength, and quality of disease. The emotional consciousness finds comfort in status quo, regardless how unacceptable to the mind. All healing comes via the individual's higher alignment with that which overshadows him, soul fire instilling oneness and order. Healing begins in the mental body and moves through the astral, etheric, and into the physical. True healing is the resolution of karma. Karma is the relationship between cause and effect. The cause is still available to you and the patient right now. Transmute the cause and healing must happen. 50% of the task is to allow it to happen. If the concept of health was understood, there would be no discarnation or death.
Love yourself and all that you truly are.
The imprisoned splendor. Our real nature lies within. The path before us has been pointed out. It is not an easy one, nor should it be. Spiritual muscles are not gained on a flat and paved road, but rather by climbing straight up the mountain face. We are as a seed thrust into the ground, first groping in the dark, not seeing the light from above, then putting forth a rootlet, finding nourishment, then a small groping meristem, growing only by instinct towards the light. Advance now is rapid as the sun is blessing it, and then, at the greatest point of pressure, we burst forth into a flowering glory and benefit those still groping in the dark.
Truth is within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things, whate'er you may believe. There is an inmost center in us all, where truth abides in fullness, and around, wall upon wall, the gross flesh hems it in. And to know rather consists in opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape, than in effecting entry for a light supposed to be without.
See yourself as you really are. And this is what the average person's aura looks like right now. Here is what you can look like if you use the methods I describe in the second and third part of this series. And this is the glorious aura of a fourth initiate, the Arhat.
By your light shall ye be known.
The human heart can go the lengths of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries breaks, cracks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flows, the thaw, the flood, the upstart spring. Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to face us everywhere, never to leave us till we take the longest stride of soul we ever took. Affairs are now soul size. The enterprise is exploration into God. Where are you making for? It takes so many thousand years to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake? There is a flame within me that has stood unmoved, untroubled through a mist of years, knowing not love nor laughter, hope nor fears, nor foolish throb of ill, nor whine of good. I feel no shadow of the winds that brood. I hear no whisper of a tide that veers. I weave no thought of passion nor of tears, unfettered eye of time, of habitude. I know no birth, I know no death that chills. I fear no fate nor fashion, cause no creed. I shall outdream the slumber of the hills. I am the bud, the flower, I the seed. For I do know that in whate'er I see, I am the part, and it the soul of me.